Yeah, so like we did yesterday, as soon as this was an actual event, we have lots of circles in the room, kind of doing the same thing we're doing here. From the front of the room, we've already talked about kind of deliberation and kind of we've explained the process and how we're collecting information and using the information. And then we've already established the problem, right? So we had some statistics about the increase in childhood obesity, those type of things. So in your groups, what you're going to do is you're going to spend about, got my phone, about 10 minutes each, kind of talking through each approach. So then we'll switch facilitators for each approach. That facilitator should start out with a quick little summary, right? Knowing that we have this in front of them, so you don't have to read it to us. But just say, this first approach, this is kind of the primary argument, and then open it up. Normally your first question pretty open-ended, but then maybe have some, kind of think back to the 5 basic moves, right? So you'll be kind of controlling who speaks, you'll do some paraphrase potentially, you'll do some probing questions, which is asking that person a follow-up question, some reaction question to get other people to react to that person said, or some transition questions, which is kind of changing the shifting the conversation to another on the guy. Right?
Should we declare which character we are?
I think, so you don't have to pick that character and be that character the whole time, right?
Okay.
But just every once in a while to kind of enrich the conversation. And you don't even have to, you can just say, well, as a small business owner, So you kind of look at it and kind of pick one that hadn't been done with before.
Okay.
And obviously you don't have to read that out loud, but just kind of give a quick kind of reference that kind of helps us know who you are. And for some of them, we might not know, because maybe you are that, right? Like number 8, you're a parent who believes that your child learns to make their own decisions and mistakes, so that might be kind of your opinion anyway. But this just kind of gives us a little bit more to work with instead of, do you have,
I don't know.
yeah, here, the role play, so you need.
So what we are doing
Yeah,
first.
I mean, if you do this exercise in class, I can send you this too, and sometimes you can cut it up and then assign people if you want, right? And it gives you a role play.
Thank you so much.
All right, are you ready to go? So we'll start with Brooklyn.
All right, so we are gathered to discuss what exactly to do about childhood obesity. It is a growing problem in the United States. An increasingly large percentage of children are overweight or obese. It is having ramifications in terms of health. It has public policy implications. It has educational implications. So we're here to kind of discuss what exactly we should do about this and how to approach the problem. First, I want to start by talking about the idea that obesity is really an individual and family responsibility, that the solution to it lies with the child, lies with their parents, lies with their family unit. So who wants to get started along that vein of thought, along that approach, that the solution here is with the individual, with the family?
So really, it's such a hard topic, but and I feel sort of bad about saying this, but I work very early in the morning. I work 2 jobs, and then my child stays in an after-school program. So I pick my child up 6, 7 o'clock at night, and I know I should go buy that grapefruit in the store, but sometimes it's just easier because I'm so tired, and we have such the dollar that I have to spend on the fresh vegetables versus the dollar I can buy an entire value meal at McDonald's. It's just it's easier, and so I think it's just really hard sometimes for us.
Okay, so what I'm hearing is that it's easier as a parent to sometimes pick the less healthy option than the healthier option. Is that right?
I think so, yeah.
Okay.
Easier and cheap.
And cheaper, yeah.
Yeah, you have to choose between one grapefruit versus an entire value meal.
Yeah.
Okay. Does anyone agree with that?
I would say that also parents, the obesity is not only the nutrition stuff, it's also about the physical activity. So I think this is good if parents sometimes have this scene of buying some fast food just to make it faster, and then during the weekends they may spend some quality time doing some exercises, some bike rides or something with their children. They need to spend their time with children, so and so. So why not making it active time?
Okay. So it almost sounds like you think there could be, am I right in hearing this, there's some kind of possible trade-off that maybe sometimes it's okay to do what you think is easier from a nutritional standpoint, but you can also offset that by when you have free time together, making it okay. Interesting.
Well, I think also that it's the nature of our society to be fast food. We want fast, everything is instant. And then also there is other ways, and I think that we need to help parents have a different choice. Because usually the excuse is I live a fast life and don't have time to cook, but we have weekends. So over the weekend we could cook some food and store food in the refrigerator and then prepare with a salad and do something that is a little bit different rather than going to McDonald's, for instance, and pick up fast food. I think it also the issue here is related to economics. So junk food is really cheap, and then that's mainly what is the driving force in the choices for food, especially for children.
So it sounds like, if I'm hearing this right, a big part of the problem is the cost disparity between the nutritious food and junk food, basically. And I think that ties to what Wendy was saying. Correct me if I'm wrong here, but one is just so much more convenient and so much less expensive. If you are a parent on the go, if your child has activities, maybe that just is so much an easier option. Okay, so we're hearing some good ideas about what might be some of the causes here. You know, we're talking about obesity being an individual and family responsibility. So what might be some ideas? We've already heard one about using weekends as food prep time and another about using weekends as available time as activity time. What might be some other ways then that individuals and families on their own time can address this issue? And aside from doing food prep for a week or doing active time together, what might be some other ideas?
I think education also would be a major component here because there is not really a connection between an open connection between eating good and being healthy. So I think it's family-led and more about the benefit of having a good meal for everybody, not only just for the children but for themselves also. It will be, in a way, we will be able to address this problem. I think education will be important here.
Okay. What about maybe so we've been focusing on elements of this approach if we say it is an individual's or family's responsibility. What about some of the trade-offs if we make this really the individual or family's responsibility? What are some thoughts on the potential trade-offs if that's where we put the onus on tackling obesity?
Well, I think one of the most important trade-off hits upon the thesis of this speech. I don't find the problem of obesity as being connected only with individual choices and being alienated from all the other society matters. We all have to pay our taxes for fight on obesity, for public health care, and so on. The money which could be spent on other things which maybe would be more beneficial, especially when we are talking about simply a change of lifestyle. So I don't think that we can say that it is only limited to the person who makes the choice. It is a problem of the whole society, and I think this is what kind of trade-off impacts the whole society as a whole.
Okay.
Well, I own a local fast food restaurant, and I'm just not comfortable with these trade-offs because ahead of my thoughts. Because, you know, I'm not trying to market my food as healthy. You know, I'm not lying to people. I'm a business owner. And so I don't understand if people want to make that choice. So what's the problem? You know, that people should be given personal freedom. People are adults.
Well, I mean, what we're talking about here is with children, so they're not adults, right? I mean, so a lot
But
of
the
children don't
parents-
have the opportunities.
Parents are buying.
Right,
I mean,
I think
obviously.
that's what, I guess, the reason, I mean, I support this approach in general, that I do think it is a family responsibility, but I also think we're seeing that families aren't taking that responsibility seriously enough, right? So the question becoming, if parents aren't parenting well, then to what degree do we need to step in? And yes, I support people making their own choices, but these children are making their own choices. Their parents are making bad choices. So what is our responsibility as a society to step in? You know, I guess that's what I struggle with.
Out of curiosity, you said you don't really like these trade-offs because the trade-offs seem to take focus away from this being an individual choice and parents saying this is what's right for my family. So if we're acknowledging maybe that, say, eating fast food every day is not necessarily healthy for a child or for a family, what might you suggest to kind of
I mean, they
push
need
the parents to make
take
these decisions?
responsibility. At some point, we can't legislate everything. At some point, you know, people need to stand up and maybe see this as an indulgent choice. It's not something they need to do every day, but I don't see why we're going to penalize business owners because people can't make their own. I mean, this is what America is about. It's about personal freedom and you know, the right to own a business without being penalized in this way. And so, you know, I'm uncomfortable with these trade-offs.
Well, on the other hand, the U.S. government subsidizes farming, and same as European Union, and spends millions of dollars on food production. Then what's the problem in adjusting the money flow in such a way that the healthy food would be more easily available, for example, in your shop, and making the junk food a little bit less attractive, also from the economic point of view. The mechanism is already prepared, but we just maybe have to adjust it in a little bit different way.
I agree, and I'd be willing to change my business model if the market changed, but this is the market right now. I'm a business person. It's the culture that I live in.
Yeah, I think many people are addicted to fast food, so you have your customers. If you start selling only healthy foods, then you will lose them.
I lose money, yeah.
Yeah, it's not your job to change the culture.
No.
That's what I'm saying. It's a broader responsibility in a sense. I don't think we're not blaming you.
Thank you.
I respectfully disagree with that because we are talking about the food for children, and then we need to, as a community, and homeowners, government, individual people, we are all responsible for teaching what is appropriate, what is not appropriate, especially when it's related to children. As a homeowner, a store, I think also we need to let's say, for instance, Coca-Cola should also be contributing a major one now, rather than having a full drink, having half drink. I think this is an acknowledgement that we all are in this together. It's true, I agree that we have to have freedom of choices because we are in a free country. But then we have to find a balance between the total freedom and what is also good for all of us, because eventually we all gonna pay the bill.
Well, and that's why I've started offering carrot sticks and salads at my franchise,
Apple
because, you know, it is important. I agree with you.
Yeah, it's good. It's good to stop there. That's about 12 minutes or so. So how did you feel?
Good.
Yeah, you have a good tone to you. You can tell, you know, I think again, most of us are teachers, right? You know, but you felt very comfortable. You seemed very comfortable.
Especially the last 4 or 5 minutes when I didn't really have to do the whole
Right.
yeah.
Sorry. Again, we fell into actually forgetting we're training and just kind of doing it, right? I mean, obviously you were role playing. So you started off kind of thinking, trying to jot down some of your interventions. So you kind of paraphrase the first 2 or 3, right? And did it. So it sounds like if I'm getting it right. So again, doing that paraphrase making it easier for people to kind of push back in a sense. And then you did one kind of connection, kind of so this kind of connects back to what Wendy. Those are always useful because people feel heard, right? Like, wow, they remembered what I said. And then that also kind of does what we're trying to do is you're creating interaction, right? So one way to create interaction is get people to talk to each other. Another way to get interaction is what you said kind of connects with what she says. How do we kind of do, So then you're kind of being more explicitly kind of creating interaction or bringing it forth, right? And then you kind of had the transition question of, in some ways we were already pushing back on it, right?
Yeah.
So then your transition was, what are the trade-offs, right? But we were already kind of there, right?
Yeah.
So it might have been better in terms of the transition to say, so someone that really supports this, what do you think, because everyone was kind of like, it's not the parents' fault and that kind of stuff, right? I mean, it's still a good transition to kind of point that to it, but in 10 minutes is too short. But
Yeah, I thought he did a great job of balancing, but on that trade-off question, when you moved, like she answered and I had one thought and then I was going to respond and then he asked other questions, so then I had to stop and like reformulate my thought. That was kind of the experience I had as a participant.
Yeah.
So.
Yeah. And one interesting thing you did that I need to think through more about how the best way to do this in senses, because you ask questions in terms of what might be some ideas, what can we do, right? And generally with the NIF form, when we're going through the approaches, we don't tend to ask that kind of question in terms of action. Action is more at the end, right? So we want to spend the deliberations like, struggling with the tensions and thinking about the different sides and creating understanding of the different modes. And then on the back end, which we're not kind of doing, right? And so when we say, okay, now that we've had that conversation, what actions do you support? Because then it's likely that those actions are actions that kind of negotiate these different tensions in a way,
And that
right?
gets done in the reflection, which is what
Right.
they're kind of asking about,
Right.
because we haven't modeled that. Yeah.
Yeah.
Right.
So I'm not saying you made a mistake or anything like
Yeah.
that, but just to think about when you're asking people to brainstorm specific actions, we do that at the end after we've talked about all 3, right? And if we do it well, which is sometimes hard when we have lots of small tables, right? If I'm facilitating through the approaches, I'm identifying some tension. So then at the back end, say, okay, so one thing that we all really kind of saw that it is a parent responsibility, but also recognize that the parents aren't really doing a good job with that responsibility. So what are some ideas you have that can kind of do that? And I think yours was a great example, right? We need to teach parents skills on how to have healthy food, even though when you don't have time and not much money, right? So what are some healthy foods that are cheap, right? Or you can go buy in bulk or this kind of thing, right? Or you can make, several healthy foods on the weekend and then freeze them. So then all you have to do when you get home is microwave them, right? Which is, so that becomes, what essentially you're doing there is you're trying to transcend that tension between, we want parents to act better, but we also recognize that, especially low-income parents don't have the time or money, it makes it hard to act better, right? So then now we're brainstorming actions that kind of negotiate that tension. Make sense? So sometimes it's worth it during the approach, especially if there's a clear tension, to take advantage of it right then, right? Okay, so what ideas do you have? What would work that would kind of, be able to negotiate that? But generally, that the process is, let's talk through it so we see all the tensions, we understand kind of the issue, we drop our blinders essentially, and then that last 45 minutes of the forum is when, okay, now that we've had this conversation, what are you willing to do? What are some ideas you have for nonprofits? What are some ideas, what should businesses kind of do? And that McDonald's has adjusted, right? You can now get apple slices instead of French fries in a Happy Meal. There are all these little things. Now they didn't take away French fries, right? They're just, as a business, right, giving options now. So as a parent, if I want to have a little bit more healthy options, now I have more healthy options. And that's part of the response.
I think that may be a difference between the problem we discussed when the problem is fairly small, when we have a real power of changing something, like in the situation where you were a shop owner, then I think such attitude, what can we do about it during the conversation might work.
Yep.
The brainstorming, attempt to finding a solution at the end, I think would better work when we are talking about problems which need, for example, more wider consultations, more wider involvement, I think.
Yeah, and part of, again, the NIF models, the reason we have the approaches is not the approaches are 3 choices, right? the approaches are designed to ensure a full conversation. So that's kind of the idea. It's like, let's get through the conversation. Let's see all the different sides and perspectives, right? Now, once we have that, then we can do the hard work of kind of what's next, right? And does that make sense, right? Because that question of, okay, let's brainstorm some ideas, I think is a good one. We need to do that, right? But if we do that in the middle of the deliberation, then we're not talking through something. We didn't talk at all about stigma, right? We didn't talk, that kind of thing, right? So that's why I'm thinking about that brainstorming actions. I agree with you. Sometimes it might be a short thing. Let's kind of do it right then, right? But if you're doing a good job, and then if you think about the cycle of deliberation, right? So as I get the notes from the 15 tables, right, I start seeing how do they talk about that first one. Me as a deliberative practitioner, I start identifying, okay, here's some things we need to push on, So then the next time we gather, we say, okay, well, last time we talked, here's the tough question that we really struggled with, right? So then this time we're going to focus on how do we take that on, right? So it kind of, that's why I think it's useful sometimes to kind of split those actions of really understanding the issue and understanding the tensions and then brainstorming the ideas, right? Sometimes you can kind of flow right into them, and sometimes it's better to kind of split them up, right, as we go. There's one other thought I had. Do you have this too? We're kind of still using this, and then we're giving this to people like some other ideas.
That's fine.
But I don't know if you have this from yesterday.
Yeah,
Okay. Nice, nice job. Go. All right, so we'll switch here. Take it apart.
Okay, let me see. So we are
Well,
discussing.
He's going to do two.
No. It's
Oh,
a
you're
question.
asking a question. Okay.
I'm asking a question. Okay, so we are looking at the approach, and then we can take any of these roles.
Yeah, just if you, that.
Okay.
I mean, that's something. When I do it in my class, sometimes I cut those up and I give students and I tell them this is your role, or I have them cut up and they can flip through and pick one. Right. For y'all, I was just saying if you want to look through that and then kind of do what Wendy did, is just kind of pick, and that's just to kind of enrich the conversation. I think we're all professors, right? So it's gonna, it's a very limited conversation in some ways, while we're diverse in others certainly. But then that can kind of just bring some new dimensions to it that gives us a little bit more to work with as facilitators.
Okay, so let us switch to the second approach. Some people say that schools should take a stronger role in the dealing with this problem. Maybe ban the junk food or increase time for the PE or health classes. So schools should be more involved. What do you think about? What's your first impression about this approach? Is it right one?
As an elementary school teacher, that I have seen how the children have been a teacher for 20 years, and I have seen how now we have this epidemic of children being obese or overweight. I think the school has a major role to play in helping the society to address this situation. I believe that all of us has investment in the health of the country and teaching children. We have to start teaching children to be able to make a difference, because every time that we address the children, we also need to address the parents. And working together, I think we can make a difference.
Okay, so you are saying that you agree with this, yeah, with this approach, that schools should be more involved.
Correct.
And you would like to see like schools more involved also in teaching parents, yeah, how to teach the children.
I agree with that. I'm a mom and I work really hard to provide healthy, organic food. I work hard to make sure that everything is fresh and that they have a good lunch every day. And then they come home and I find out, they want to have the pizza that their friend had that's, canned and processed. And they're being offered sugar items at snacks. And it's so frustrating because I'm working so hard to make sure that they eat well. And it's like, it's an uphill battle.
Okay, so
I don't feel supported by the school.
okay, so you are taking your responsibility as a
Yeah,
parent,
right.
but the school are,
It's not,
in your opinion, not
helping.
doing
Yeah,
enough.
right.
Okay, so what's in your opinion, what school should do more?
Well, we need healthy options at school, so this is not an issue. And we shouldn't have sugar options being given at snack.
Okay, so for example, like banning junk food would be an option for you.
Yeah.
Okay, so we agree with this?
Yeah, but on the other hand, as a PE teacher, I must say also some parents spoil school's work because they get from the doctors the excuse that their children will not attend physical education classes. So I think this is what Maria said. School and parents need to collaborate on the subject because some parents are not so well aware of the problem as you, and these are them who give sweets for the lunch for their children, and children don't go to don't take lunch offered by the school because they prefer sweets.
So like we all agree that parents and schools and teachers should cooperate more, yeah, like to provide healthy options for children.
Coming at this from an administrator's point of view, already at the school, where's the money coming from? We're stretched thin as is in terms of classroom time. Starting in elementary school, we've got kids prepping for state tests. We don't have additional classroom time to devote to teaching nutrition. And we've tried giving kids healthy foods in the past. They don't eat them. And how do we explain to their parents that their kid didn't eat lunch today because we tried to give them food they wouldn't eat? So I think pinning this really on the schools, it's not really fair to us because this should be happening in the home. We don't have the time, we don't have the money here at school. We've got to focus on the resources we have that we're given, and it's just not there.
So you're saying that schools are not having resources enough resources to deal with this?
Not even close.
And
not
tried, yeah, something.
We'd
in
be
the
open
past,
to
or-
it, but we've tried giving healthier food, but kids don't eat it when we offer it. We offer them salads, we offer them vegetables, and they want pizza.
Okay.
I respectfully disagree with Jerome because we always hear that we cannot do this because of this, and I think again, a school has to change. A school need to teach children what they need so that they can have a better life. And there is a problem, and we all need to be addressed. It has to be addressed in the school because children spend most of their time awake in time at the school. So the curriculum could be integrated in a way that that particular component of eating has to be there. The school could teach all the subjects related to having a garden. Through the garden, there is everything that they need to teach. And also to the cafeteria, because children go and eat food at the cafeteria. They need to know what they are eating to be able to be more aware citizens to make a better choice, because we are preparing them for the future also, and they will be parents in the future. So they need to know what is nutrition, and also how this is going to impact not only their life, but also in general the country.
But taking his argument into account, could you support those health classes, additional garden classes, even if that means less math or less science?
Well, there is more science because we are teaching through growing, we are teaching and we are bringing the parents, especially minority parents, because they have a background in growing and cultivation, and then you can even link that, the curriculum that you are having, to teach all the subjects related to having a garden that they can also in turn take it home and then also start cultivating good food. I think there is a choice here that we are not exploring. Some of the schools already are doing that, but not everybody is doing it. And I think there is a need to change the curriculum in a way that we say, well, that we don't have time because math can be taught everywhere. Math, science, reading, writing, and even social studies because it's an issue also as a social group.
So you're saying that we can like do both, teach garden and science at the same time, or same classes.
Yes.
Okay. And you are agreeing with Eva and Wendy that it could also foster cooperation between school and parents. Gardening classes, for example. Okay, so do you see any other trade-offs of this?
Well, I'd like to push a little bit on the teacher-parent collaboration. As a teacher, I've got 35 different students, and the time it takes for me to try to negotiate with 35 parents, and often the parents are forced, so there's two parents that disagree themselves. So now I'm trying to collaborate. I've got 4 different classes of 30 students each, so now I'm trying to kind of work in the opinions of 200 people to develop my curriculum and make my decisions. I like the idea of teacher-parent collaboration, and I love working with passionate parents, but then sometimes passionate parents can also be a difficulty. So I think it's one of those ideas that teacher-parent collaboration, let's kind of work together, sounds a lot easier than it actually is in reality, in a sense. When you have parents that have very different ways of thinking, and we could talk about these wonderful things about nutrition and gardening and things like that, but then there's lots of students that say, hey, I need you to teach my kid how to write and how to add, and everything else is my job in a sense. So I think that we need to talk through that a little bit more to figure out how that might work.
So you agree with idea, but you see a lot of drawbacks when it comes to the fact.
Yeah, and I'm teaching, I'm teaching 7 classes a day, so any teacher, faculty, any teacher-parent collaboration is on my own time, it's on email, it's after school and things like that. I'm basically not paid, you don't pay me to spend time collaborating with parents, right? So then I'm donating my own time to be able to do that kind of work.
I'm glad now that the working with parents is one of the components in the rubric that is evaluating teachers, because that has been an excuse in the past, but now the school districts are moving and including collaboration with the home, also as part of measurement of teacher effectiveness, because we know that without the parents, there is not going to be success for the child. And again, that is true, it's a lot of more work. There is extra time that the teachers need to put into working and making these things happening, but it's a matter of choices. Not everybody is going to be a teacher, and we are looking for effective teachers who are willing to do that work.
I agree.
Last comment.
I agree. I think it's about again looking outside the box and figuring out creative solutions. I've definitely, I am a passionate parent and sometimes can be too passionate, but I've had experiences where I'm volunteering in a teacher's class, and the classroom is welcoming of parents, and I feel that they need me and they understand how to work with parents, and it creates a good relationship, I think. And I've also had experience of volunteering in class where I felt very unwelcome. So kind of bringing awareness to teachers of the importance of thinking through different ways of including teachers during their workday or during times that they would normally be there is really important.
Yes, we'll stop there for a second. And just to piggyback off this a little bit, this goes back to what I talked about yesterday. Collaboration is this powerful word now. It's a buzz term. Everyone loves collaborate. In the rhetorical literature, it's called a God term, right? But then in reality, collaboration is hard. And I'm the collaboration person, right? I'm the one that's trying to provide resources for my community to collaborate. I'm running all these meetings. It takes a lot of work and a lot of effort and a lot of resources in a sense. So that's kind of one of those examples in this. And I volunteer for my kids' school, and I'm on the advisory. I forget what the name of it is, but we meet once a month with the principal and that kind of stuff, with the teacher from each school, and there's 5 parents. And most of the teachers, volunteers are a pain. It's so hard to give the volunteers something to do. It's and for all the parents are like, we need more volunteer. We recognize the resources and it's tough. It's like, well, we got parent, and I'm in an affluent neighborhood, right? So most of the parents, you have stay-at-home moms that can kind of help. And the parents, the teachers are all like, no, they're paying. Like, we don't have enough time. I have to supervise them. I have to train them what to do, and then I know I have to. It was such an eye-opening thing for me because and as part of that notion of these magic bullets, right? We just think, hey, magic, volunteers can fix this. And I'm not saying the teachers are right? I think some of them can use volunteers. My wife volunteers a lot, so some of them use volunteers who are great, and some of them don't, right? But it is that example that collaboration sometimes is this magic bullet. We should just all work together. The problem is working together takes so much time and so much effort. But you also then, once you realize that, once you get the blinders down, that okay, it's not a magic bullet, collaboration, I think still collaboration is going to work, but we just need to work at it, right? We need to get the administrator, right, to provide some time, right? So if it's worked into my evaluation as a teacher, how much I collaborate with you, well then probably it's worked into my time, right? Maybe I get 2 or 3 hours off from my schedule that it's spent time to collaborate, to be able to meet with parents, to be able to eat, those type of things. But we start kind of getting past that magic bullet simple thing, right? The other quick thing I want to kind of throw into was part of the theory is when you deliberate, you get away from blaming and the group takes ownership, right? And I don't know if you felt that even with these kind of example things, right? It's easy to blame the fast food owner, right? Or it's easy to blame the administrator, but then when you hear things from their perspective, there's like, the fast food owner is part of it, but we can't really blame them, right? Like if you turn your fast food into a health place, you're closed in a month. We recognize that, right? Or the administrator, once they're actually, it's really easy to attack the administrator, but when they're there saying, I don't have the money to do this, I'd love to do, then all these smart people are like, okay, we can't just assume they're fixing it. That's part of that process of when you have a diverse group and you have good material that kind of represents those things, is we push back on the wishful thinking, the magic bullets, right, that fix everything, right, and we push back on the blaming, the devil figures, right, that it's all the administrator, the fast food person, or the bad parent, right, and we start as a group saying, okay, wait a second, let's actually take on the tough issue, right, and that goes back to that grown zone stuff, right, when you get rid of the wishful thinking, oh man, now it's a hard problem. But hopefully, if it's a good process, and this is where NIS sometimes is almost too short. Right? I think NIS sometimes does a good job of people getting into the growing zone, but maybe not out of it, right? Because we drop our blinders, we get rid of the wishful thinking, but then do we have enough time in a 2-hour meeting to really work through and feel that we leave? We don't want people leaving thinking that's impossible, right? We want people leaving going, okay, it's much more complicated than I thought, but man, we came up with some good ideas to take that on, right? So that's the front end of the grown zone is, okay, we get rid of this wishful thinking, it's much more complicated, but then to what degree can we start that path of coming down to say, okay, now here's some collaborative solutions, here's some things we can really do to take on that tension. Yeah.
I going back to administrators and people in decision-making positions, I think when you get somebody who really can think out of the box, everything can happen. I mean, because it's a matter of building trust, and it's a matter of bringing everybody to the table, and then see here is a problem, and truly, the obesity for children is a major problem. So how we could, but then the administrators, the parents, and even I know you don't get very many parents, but if you get the few parents and those parents bring some other parents, eventually we will be effective and we will be addressing the problem. So I think that has to start from having an administrator who really can themselves think out of the box. Because if they say, well, here we have been doing this for last 15 years and our scores are decent, what to change? But everything around is changing. I think having that person there with the power, that will do it.
And that goes back to some of the changes I was talking about local, at least for secondary education, right? For K-12, of local control versus state control versus state. We're getting so many more now standards, right? Because they feel the system's not working, so we need to kind of have some strong standards and strong expectations from the top. So when we have that, you're forcing schools more and more to do things the same way. So the principal that wants to think out of the box has less flexibility, right? So because you're but standards are great. No one's against standards, but then you recognize, okay, when we have standards from the top, that also means less innovation, less flexibility, right? If I'm having to teach these certain things, now all of a sudden I can't. Oh, I'd love to do the garden, but I can't. It doesn't fit into what I'm required to. So then that you start identifying those tensions and started working through that. Right?
This is I'm from New York, and this is one of the huge issues going on in public education right now in New York. New York is a Common Core state, and the current teacher evaluation system is heavily tied, and the governor is pushing for having it be even more heavily tied to test results. So they're in a position where even if you have the administrator and teachers who want to think outside the box, if they can't do that while teaching exactly what's on that test, which says that they're effective at their job, then their hands are kind of tied.
You know, we deal, our department here is linked to the state test that the teachers need to take. So I know exactly what you are talking about. And I'm thinking there has to be, accountability is good. I know in my field, if you say this, I think accountability is good because you want some measurement at the end. If I have invested all this money, all this time, the children have been here, and in our case, teachers have been here, I think they're supposed to pass those tests because there is minimum requirement in those tests. The thing here, and I'm the one that study all these tests because I'm the coordinator in my department of student success, and meaning I make sure that all our students pass the state test. And I'm thinking, in a way, some accountability has to be there so that to make things happen. But then one thing cannot take from the other. I wouldn't say, well, I don't want to focus on preparing good, strong teachers because, well, I have to just prep for the test. I think there is a balance. If the tests are measuring what the effectiveness of teacher in this case, I'm supposed to prepare them to be able to pass those tests. So I think there is the accountability, even though now people doesn't even want to hear that word. I think it is good for us. The only thing is the way we use the results of that accountability, and it's being now used. Well, it's measuring minimum skills. I'm gonna focus on this, and I'm gonna teach this other. I think it can be teaching for the test, also the skills that are going to be measured in the test, in addition to other things that is needed for the good of to educate people, because now we are not educating people.
Well, this is really a problem if we are teaching students just to allow them to make them pass the test, the most to get most of the score, the best score possible of, or if we are doing some real academic teaching. It's sometimes even quite funny situation. I got my subject, environmental law, is not you can choose it. Yeah, it's not obligatory, and students can go through all the education system and become a solicitor in Poland without without having an hour of environmental law. And then the big law companies have problems because they don't have people who would be able to deal with those problems. And for example, I got a lady who is finishing her preparation for a solicitor, and she is making some voluntary assistantship at my office in order to pick up some of this knowledge, because it is needed. The local administration to whom they serve, because they provide services to local administration, expect them to know environmental law, and it's not something what you can fully learn from the books. So I think the minimum can sometimes really play a extremely devastating role to even on the job market. We cannot expect that we will find good jobs for 300 students each year for 300 students with exactly the same knowledge and exactly the same capabilities.
Let's jump back. Because we're still deliberating.
Yeah. Sorry.
That's what I want to do. But so back to the facilitation. The deliberation was an example to kind of think about facilitation. Right? So how did you feel? I think you did well.
I had kind of stressed first, mostly because of my English, not because of the group. So. But it was fun. So I
You had some. You felt in control. You seemed comfortable to me, right? You had some good. I really like one of your intervention.
Right.
You asked an even if intervention, right? So it's kind of a back and forth here. So then you kind of pushed back on her and said, well, are you willing to support that even if? Kind of thinking about his thing, and then she kind of transcended the even if, right? Of saying, oh, well, we can teach science and we can kind of do the gardening kind of at the same time. That's kind of incorporated together in a way, right? That's kind of a good example of identifying attention between people, and then hopefully framing it kind of in a more positive way instead of a conflict of like, oh, how do you struggle with this, right? So that was really nicely done. One thing I think you did okay, but it reminded me of a problem that sometimes comes up. But at one point you said, so we all, well, and I kind of pushed back on it, about the teacher-parent collaboration, right? So you said, so we all agree that teacher collaboration is a good thing, right? Well, actually only just 2 people said that, right? And that's a typical, my young facilitators always kind of do that. Okay, so we all agree this. I'm like, no. So be very careful kind of announcing consensus, right? When there's 8 people, because clearly, and I did push back on that generally, but if I'm someone who was against that, and then 2 people agree with it, and then you say, so we all agree, I'm like, wait, what? So all of a sudden I feel like my voice isn't being heard, kind of thing, right? So you can kind of say you can qualify it sometimes. So it sounds like that there's a lot of positive energy towards this, or a lot of us agree about that, but saying we all agree. And that's one of the reasons I don't like the summaries, right? Yeah. Because normally the summary is like, oh yeah, so we talked about this and we all like this idea. Well, do we all like it? And one quick thing that you can sometimes do too is I do little quick polls a lot, right? I was talking about this earlier. It's with a lot of young students, it's kind of uncool to talk sometimes, right? So if you ask an open question, everyone's kind of saying there. So I do a little like from 1 to 5. 5 being you really like this idea to 1 you're not too sure. Where are y'all? It's like a quick little pulse, right? It's sometimes very useful for the notes, right? But then it's also useful to get voices out, right? So if everyone agrees and one person disagrees, you can say, so what are we missing? Why don't you like it in a way, right? That's the same thing with a keypad. It's interesting that some people feel the keypads will support the majority too much, right? But I actually use the keypads a lot to give voice to the minority, right? So if we ask a question and almost everyone likes it, but then there's 2 people that disagree, I can say, what are we missing? What can we hear from the people that disagree? Yeah. Right? So you're actually opening up space for the person with a minority opinion versus, so those quick little polls can work. Yeah.
On the other hand, you're putting him in the defensive.
Right.
What are we missing?
Right. And normally, and at least with the keypads, it's anonymous, right? So I'm not making them speak, right?
Okay.
So I can say, like, if you're willing to kind of, so I'm kind of yielding the floor to the minority opinion, but yeah, how you phrase it, right? So I'm not saying, well, one person's wrong. Can you tell us? No, I'm more phrasing it in a sense of clearly it's a valuable opinion here that we want to hear you speak in a sense, right? But the other thing is when I do the quick little polls, especially with a quiet group, right? Because if I just say, so what do you think about this idea going? Right? But if I say, 5 to 1, do you like this idea or not? Particularly if someone's a 5 or someone's a 1, I can say, it's a 5. Why? Right? And now I've tricked them into expressing an opinion, right? So now that I'm asking them for the backup, right? So quick little polls can, but it also can be useful when it seems there's consensus to say, where are y'all on this? And hey, if everyone's 5, then I can say, we all agree with this, right? But then it also, for the notes, it's very useful. Like, quick poll here, and people really like this or didn't like it or whatever, right? So it's another little facilitation kind of tool that you can use. All right, let's switch to,
Can you say, like, 2 people here seems to agree and how the rest of you feel about that?
Yeah, sure.
Yeah. Okay.
So both of y'all really like this. What do other people think, right?
Okay.
But again, also use, instead of expressing consensus, right? Sometimes it's better to almost push on consensus. So it seems like we really like this idea, but can anyone make an argument against it? Right? And that not only opens up space for the person that was against it to feel comfortable speaking, but even if no one is against it, to be able to think of, okay, people that are against this whole thing say, well, I mean, clearly teacher-parent collaboration probably takes a lot of time, you know. I know teachers are already kind of pressed for time. When do they do that? Rather than kind of express, hey, we all agree, I'd rather say, it seems like we all agree. What are we missing, right? What Alberto, I really like, one of the trainers from Kettering, one of his favorite questions is, when people all like something, it's like, if it's so obvious this is the right thing to do, why aren't we doing it? What's keeping us from doing it, you know? And again, people realize, well, I can see people are against it because of this, or that kind of stuff, right? So I'd always rather, my impulse of facilitator is to push back on consensus versus announce consensus. Right? All right, so who wants to do the third approach?
And on childhood obesity, tax junk food, make it much higher, much more expensive than it is now. Just like cigarettes, tax it the same way. Regulate fast food restaurants so that they have to offer healthy options. Publicly fund sports programs in public parks, and increase funding for other things like sports so that people can actually go and exercise. So what do you think about this? Should the government take over and say, okay, we need to tax this, Hershey bar needs to cost $3, and maybe people will eat this.
I don't really like taxes. I don't think government should tax anything. So it's a very bad idea because people should choose. Can choose cheap food if they want, and it's not government should decide what people should eat.
So I'm hearing that people should have choices.
Yes.
Do you have any other ideas?
I mean, I agree with him. This is America. If I want to balloon up to 700 pounds and die of a heart attack at 45, that's my right. I don't like the government saying, well, you have to eat this stuff, or it's now going to be prohibitive for you to make this choice. That's direct government intervention that infringes on my freedom.
All right, but then it's true that you should have the freedom to die of a heart attack if you want. But should the government then have to give you Medicare and Medicaid? Should the government then deal with your health issues? Maybe you should.
That's mine. I have health insurance. That's their problem, not the government's. Keep the government out of my business. That's my point of view.
I think as an adult, you can make choices, but here we are talking about child obesity. So I'm thinking that I don't like to see 100% regulations by the government, but I think the government has to have voice also in this situation because it's a national epidemic. Like any other sin or any other disease, then we are expected to receive funding. The states need funding from the federal government to be able to address this problem. So with the money come some regulations and rules. So I'm thinking that I'm willing to get the money first because we need it in the state to be able to address the problem. I don't want too many regulations because I think the local government need to be the one in charge, and like any other state, they should be able to decide. But also, I think the government need to intervene to be able to help and assist with this epidemic because it's a national epidemic.
Yeah, I think I strongly agree with you. One cannot say everyone has the right to die of Ebola. So we are in a free country now. So of course, some intervention surely is needed. The question is if we can expect government to simply solve the problem, or the government can just administrate or manage some of the options, some of the solutions. Yeah, I don't think that government is the only entity who can solve the problem of child obesity, because in fact the government is not bringing up children. So I think we should try to find solutions down there, but with support from the government.
Yeah, Ebola is like extreme case, so of course government should take care of people who are sick or in these extreme cases, but food is like day-to-day activity. So what? We start with taxing McDonald's more and KFC or nachos, and where we end? Who decides where is junk food and where is health?
I think, building off that, is it the final product that's the problem? Is it the ingredients? Are we tax regulating sugar, or are we taxing and regulating candy? It's a small difference between a baguette and a donut. But people are generally more in favor of one than the other. So if the government's going to get involved with regulating foodstuffs, how are we going to go about this? It's an administrative nightmare.
Yeah, who decides?
So let me see if I understand correctly.
You're facilitating. You're fine. I'm not saying you're not doing enough.
Let me see if I'm hearing correctly. Maria, you were saying that you don't want regulations, but you want the government to do something, right? But you don't want too many regulations. Okay, and you are agreeing with her, right? That not too many regulations, but something. So the government should administer in some ways. And then both of you are against taxes completely, and you are all for free choice, personal choice, right?
I think taxation has its place, but as long as it doesn't impinge on my freedom.
Okay.
You know, what I would like, I mean, going back to the first approach and talking about parents that are trying to make good choices and it's tough for them, right? So I would be in support of figuring out as a society and government being a key tool for that to help people make better choices. I'm a little bit more concerned with punishing people for bad choices, so I'm kind of with you with that, right? But say, for example, I think all schools should have apples and for free, right? That if a kid wants to eat an apple, they can eat an apple at any time for free, you know? So how do we fund that? Now, you know, maybe one way of funding it is taxing some really bad, you know, taxing ice cream. You know, ice cream is kind of bad for you, right? So, hey, if we charge an extra quarter for everything of ice cream, and then because of that, we could have free apples at all public school, you know. So I would like to focus on how do we kind of provide obvious healthy food for cheaper, right, or for free for kids. But I don't want to tax junk food and then the government gets extra money and gets to spend it whatever they want, right?
Yeah,
My goal is more, let's make healthy food cheaper, but figuring out some way of funding that and maybe taxing some food, junk food would be a way to fund that in a way. But to keep the focus on how to make it easier to make good choices versus necessarily punishing bad choices.
But what I already said, that we all we all pay our taxes and we support with them the producers of organic and junk food together through the system of farming subsidies. So I think the money are in the system. We just may choose the way they are being spent. We simply may exclude in some part the food producers who will produce products for fast food industry, let's say, whereas give more support on the cost of the first one to those who produce organic. I think it is a role of the government who administrate those money flows.
But, you know, like you said, the administration is kind of crazy, so there's so much debate about what gets to count as organic. You know, when can you put the label of organic on your food and those type of things?
Well, I don't think that it's about putting a label. We both know that when a small piece of snack contains enough calories for the whole day for a healthy child, then we know that it's not healthy to eat it. And I think we don't have to say that when it's organic, it does not have to have anything to do with any chemistry or anything like that. I don't think that we should try to develop a definition of what is organic. Yeah.
So let me throw something. I didn't mean to cut you off. But let me throw something out there. So we're willing. Am I hearing that you're willing to pay more for organic food, but not more for candy?
No, I think I was
you
saying
say
just
that?
the opposite.
You're willing to pay more for candy?
I
Support subsidies for
well, I think we are all supporting subsidies even at the moment. So the problem is that we should just change the way in which the money which the government already takes from us is being spent. So no more taxes. No more taxes, just simply more effective spending.
Okay, Maria, you get the last word.
Okay, I think there is also other ways the government could help, like there is a movement through the USDA for urban gardening, where there is, and this is going because of the food deserts that we have in the cities, and we know that mainly poor people, they don't have access to grocery stores, and now there is so much space that can be used for cultivating good food, and we are not doing that. And I was really amazed. I had an opportunity to go to Spain, and I just was amazed to see that people go to their garden to get the food that they going to prepare for that day. And here, when I came, I started thinking about my own situation, how I keep grass. I don't eat grass. I pay for the grass, and I keep my grass. And then I'm thinking.
We pay to fertilize the grass, and then we pay to cut the grass.
Exactly.
And then we pay to fertilize.
You should buy yourself a goat.
Yeah. So this is one thing that even now I'm working really strongly for initiatives such as that. Even here at the university, we have an initiative that has to do with sustainability and a garden, also thinking about solving problems in our community. And I see the role of the government putting money in initiatives such as this one, because it's changing behavior of the community overall and addressing specific problems that we have, because food deserts are problems in our community. Not having access to fresh food, we cannot expect that poor people, especially poor people, will eat healthy food.
Yeah, it's good stuff there. No. So, did you feel?
Yeah, I just couldn't remember. I forgot to change them at all the
The five choices,
So
yeah.
I couldn't remember.
That's we threw you in.
But I've done, with Paul, we did different forums, and they were not exactly, Paul doesn't like the forums, the exact model, right?
Yep.
So then we changed that a little bit, but we still did, at least from two of them, we did this type of the three approaches.
Okay.
So then, it was a while ago, but I still kind of bring it back.
Yeah, you did. I really like the summaries that you were doing, right? And even kind of thinking about, does that become another of the basic moves, right? Do I go to 6 in a sense of just that internal summary, right? Okay, so what we're hearing so far, of just kind of going through,
That's
because there's
really
a lot of
helpful
power.
for me.
Yeah,
I
there's a
really
lot of
like
power
that.
to not only, people
Yeah.
feeling heard, right? But then also with that, you're identifying some tensions, and you're able to frame things in more succinct ways that can often, essentially it's a paraphrase, right? You just group paraphrased,
But it
right?
was necessary
You
because
covered
I was
several.
losing
Yeah.
track. Yeah.
But that was also from the forums, because I do that in class as well. I just find if too many people talk to me, then I really don't remember. So I'm like, oh my God.
Yeah.
So then that when I asked you, I really thought it was the other way. It wasn't like I heard you the way you thought that you said it.
Yeah.
I actually
Yeah, that was a great example of a
So-
paraphrase, but it was an open-ended paraphrase that made it easy for you to say, no, actually that was the opposite,
Yeah.
right? That's what you want. You want people to be
And
able to
we are
say,
taking
No,
notes.
Yeah, I think
Right.
when
That's what it is,
notes will be
right?
taken, and there would be no problem with
yeah,
it.
yeah. And sometimes you're using paraphrases because you don't know, right? They're just
Yeah.
kind of talking, and you're like, okay, so what I'm hearing, so you're throwing something out, and they're like, that's not what I meant at all, and that's a very useful paraphrase.
Yeah, I thought
You know?
at first I thought that she's pushing me.
Yeah, another interesting thing, so another way to think about the internal summaries, and the Kaner book that I mentioned, the Facilitator's Guide, which has a growing zone, it's a very useful book. So if facilitation seems something interesting to you, it's pretty cheap. It's like $25. It's a really great book to have on your shelf. But it has several kind of additional kind of facilitator moves. And one of them is tracking, right? So essentially with tracking, I did tracking the very first one. Remember when you said this was yesterday, right? When you I forgot what it was now, but you had 2 points, right? So I said, okay, hold on, there's 2 things there, right? So I acknowledged those two things, but then I said, let's talk about the first one, and then went back, right? So that's what happens often where you do a summary. It's like, okay, we're having 3 conversations at a time now, right? And you recognize as a facilitator, all 3 conversations are pretty good, but we can't have all 3 conversations with people here. So then you do a summary. Okay, what I'm hearing is this, this, and this. You know, check. Yeah, okay. So let's take the first one first, right? You know, so you're kind of identifying there's 3 conversations. Let's take one at a time. One other facilitator move that we do sometimes, and we actually do this as a process because we have a table. Let's say if we're doing this kind of stuff, especially if you have a dominator, that kind of stuff, you have 12 minutes to talk about this response. If you just ask, so what do y'all think? You don't know how many you're going to get, right? And whoever talks first really is going to set the conversation probably for the first 6 or for quite a while. So a lot of times what we'll do is we'll say, so, you know, let's get some response to this. Let's go around first. Just a quick hitter, off the top of your head, you know, what's one reaction you have, right, to this, right? So you go through, and then we actually write it. We have like a big piece of paper or an easel paper, or often folded, or the tabloid paper, 11 by 17 that sometimes copiers have, right? So we use like a Sharpie so you can write big, and then you just write, right? So now I've got 8 topics, but I almost have a menu, right? Then we can say, okay, we got 12 minutes. Which of these do we want to talk about, right? But then now you're not just allowing the first person to speak to kind of set the agenda. You have everyone's agenda. As a facilitator, you can kind of say, you know, so it lets everyone kind of speak and people responding to that. Then what we often do is you know, we do this for a brainstorm as well. So like at the back end, like, what idea, you know, from this whole conversation, let's go around, like, well, what's one idea that you heard today that you really like, right? So we get all 10 of them, and then we say, well, let's talk about these. Why do you like these, and kind of pros and cons? And then we can give everyone dots, give you 3 dots at the end, and say, hey, of these 8 ideas, which one's kind of, you support the most? And again, with the cycle, the reporting is the last part, right? That's great information for me. Because now from 15 tables, I have a list of 8 ideas from all 15 tables with dots to tell me the kind of the how much people support it. Kind of gives me a priority kind of thing, right? So that's another way of kind of doing. You start with tracking. Here, let's just get 8 ideas first on the table, and then that is it. You know, you probably don't have time to go through all 8, right? If you have 15 minutes, okay, I can do all 8 in 2 minutes each, right? Or maybe we can do 2 or 3 at 5 minutes each. But then you're not just letting the first person to talk dictate the agenda. You have a full set of agenda. Right? Now, one other thing that you did, I think is worth talking about. So the pushback, I tried to kind of write how you did it, but so they were both saying tax is bad, right?
Yeah.
So libertarians over here, and you said, well, you know, so should government have to kind of pay for your Medicare? Like that,
Yeah,
right?
that was my push.
Yeah, so it's a good question, and I want that. That's a good example of a paradox splitting, right? They're saying, hey, no taxes whatsoever, and you saw the other side of the tension. Okay, if we say people can make their own choices, but then government is having to deal with their choices afterward, right? I don't know if it's a problem, right? So let's just talk about it. But the way she did it, right? I got the impression that was your opinion. Right?
I did too.
So it was more you as a participant saying, yeah, but if we do that, you know. So I think as a facilitator, you wanted to bring up that tension. You just need to frame it as, you know, something like, well, I imagine some people would argue that, yes, you have your own choices, but then government is eventually going to have to pay those choices. How do you respond to that? You know, so that you're doing the same thing without making it seem like it was your opinion.
And
Does that
that's
make
why I
sense?
was hesitant at the end.
Yeah.
I thought that was probably too strong.
Right.
Sorry.
No, but that's a great example. And exactly what I'm saying is we want you to make some mistakes as we talk about it,
But
right?
it wasn't so much that is my opinion.
Yeah.
It was just that I wanted it to contrast, right?
No, I mean, I
So
think
the other side
what
of
you
the
did
coin.
was important. You identified a tension and got us to respond to that tension, right?
But yeah.
It was more of how you did it. I, mean, I don't know how y'all felt. Did you feel it was her opinion?
Yeah.
Just, and part of it was the emotion of it and things like that, right? But it seemed like you as a facilitator pushing back on them. So if I was them, you know, I imagine y'all were role playing somewhat, right? But if I was them, I'd be like, oh, great, facilitators, you know, and then I'm probably not going to talk the rest of the time,
Facilitators
right?
just got mad.
Right. Yeah. So how do you phrase it to help the group
Yeah.
kind of deal with that tension? You know, and there's some ways of, you know, so one way to do it, which would be even more impartial, right, would be reactions to that. What do y'all, you know, and see if someone else gives that other side, right? Because it'd be much better for another participant to say, yeah, but, you know, but if someone does it, then the next kind of level is you kind of introducing it, but you want to introduce it so it doesn't seem like it's your opinion. It's you as a facilitator wanting to kind of introduce it.
That's true.
Yeah.
But I did feel that role playing, Jerome, was also being kind of adversarial, you know, kind of very. But of course, I don't have to highlight that because it's not supposed to be adversarial. But I mean, it was very good. But I do feel that it did include stress for me because I thought, oh my gosh, this person's going to just have a fit and blow up. And I mean, if it had been a real, in a group, it would be like the person who could get mad.
Yep.
So, but it's good.
No, and you're going to have those people, and that goes back to when I talked about adversarial, expert, and deliberative, right? I mean, deliberative is designed to bring out the best in adversarial and expert, right? So having someone feeling very strongly that all taxes are bad is something to work with, right? And you can, and you can support it in some ways. Okay, I understand where you're coming from. So if you feel that they're not being heard, you do some facilitated moves to make sure but then also kind of push back in a sense, right?
It would be alright if she would simply ask Eva or myself, would you like to pay taxes for the healthcare of people, for example?
Yeah, that might be a little too strategic. So, I mean, I think that's, and part of this goes back to the cycle, right? So a lot of our events, we've done them before, right? So that my students, and a lot of our events, we do surveys beforehand, right? So then that always gives an out for the facilitator to say, so we've heard that argument before. One of the responses that we get in the survey often, though, is government's going to end up paying for their healthcare costs, right? So how do we respond? So then that way you're sourcing it differently, right? What you don't want is the source to be your opinion, right? And so sometimes it is your opinion, but just source it elsewhere, right? Because sometimes your opinion does add, it brings the counter, and it's an important part to making a better conversation, right? You just don't want it to make it seem like it's your opinion, because then that's going to silence people, and that changes the dynamic, changes your role. So that's where, the students even sometimes say, Dr. Carson in class kind of explained that one of the tensions comes up is this, right? And so then you're introducing it that way. Especially if I've done a good job at the beginning of the process to talk about one of the things that we're going to do is we're looking for tension. There are some tough choices here that we need to talk about. So the students might bring those up, right? And so then it's easier for, we understand that perspective, but it's not the government's job to be ritualistic and tell us how to behave, right? But if those choices are impacting government down the line, to what degree does it make sense for government to play more of a preventative role, right? And then all of a sudden you're having a better conversation.
I think I also made another mistake, and it's because I forgot I was a facilitator. For a minute, because when you said a donor and a baguette, and I was like, oh my God! The funniest thing. But it, if it had been a real facilitated group, obviously it would not have been for me to laugh. And then, because you might have been really serious, like.
Yeah, but then as she rephrase and ask the question will go back to them or to the group?
Either way.
Okay.
Yeah, so she could have, with that tension, she can kind of push back and say, well, or she can open up the group. And you notice me doing that a few times, right? That I would start asking a question to the person, but then I would kind of back up, or anyone else can answer this, right? And a lot of times you do have to, the phrase probing question, it kind of sounds pretty evasive, right? So you want to, you got to watch nonverbal. So sometimes someone's saying something, you decide to ask a probing question, but then as you're asking the probing question, you can tell that they're taken aback or they feel that they're kind of cornered or whatever. And that's when I often kind of then open it up. So sometimes you transition a probing question to a reaction question based on how the person's reacting, right? If they feel that they're being attacked or being pushed back, then you just open it up. Because you just want to explore the tension. You're not trying to tell them they're wrong, right? You are kind of in some way saying, you're only seeing one side of this, right? But you want the group to explore the different sides of it versus kind of attacking that person for having a narrow opinion. Right? Because again, having a narrow opinion is very natural. Right? That's how our brains work, right? We want to have narrow opinions. So you have to be very careful in that sense that you don't want to feel you're putting people on the spot sometimes.
I like all the three ways of facilitating these discussions, but one thing I noticed is that Alexandra is not
I was waiting for you to agree to the discussion.
This is what I missed, because no one said, let's hear people who did not spoke. I don't know if it was your
She was more active yesterday.
Yeah, but this is what I missed. That's not none of you noticed that there is a person who did not.
And
This is
part of-
funny because as a participant, I also wanted to hear her opinion, but I didn't feel this is my task to encourage her.
And part of that is a function of switching facilitators every time, right? You know, and part of it is for, you know, actually the first time you facilitated with that. You know, when you have a table and you're the facilitator doing all three approaches, you notice much more often, like, wow, she hasn't spoken yet, right? When you're doing it 10 minutes at a time and we're switching each time and you're thinking, okay, now I'm facilitating and everyone's like looking at how I facilitate, you know. So part of it's a function of training in a way, right?
But I noticed, there were so many other opinions, and they were coming quickly, that I thought, I don't have to call on her. And if she doesn't really, because from you I get the feeling that if somebody's not speaking, you're not supposed to call on them.
Yeah, I mean,
Because they don't want
Not
your
personally,
service,
but you can.
I tend to tell my students don't specifically call on people. I'm not saying I'm right? I mean, I think it's, you know, so we prefer more that maybe we can hear from someone we haven't heard from yet. But I think everyone kind of talking other things. So if we did, maybe everyone would turn to you. Like, maybe the one we haven't heard from yet.
Maybe she's like a bum lady.
Yeah.
But if some people are shy, I think this is the task of facilitator to help them.
But I like what your suggestion on asking, how do you feel about? It showed me, how do you say that in?
Kind of a quick poll kind of thing. Yeah.
Exactly.
And you can do thumbs up, thumbs down, thumbs sideways is a quicker one. I like, you know, from 1 to 5 because it gives you a little bit more variety than thumbs up, thumbs down, right? Because if someone's a 5, then you really kind of, and a lot of times I'm asked, I have no idea what the answer's going to be when I ask that question, right? Sometimes it's, you know, so it's a very useful tool. I use it in the classroom all the time, kind of see where people are in a way. But.
And I have another thing. So the way we did it yesterday was around the table, and the way we're doing it here is in the circle.
Yeah.
I think it's really better to do it in the circle.
Oh, yeah.
Because yesterday.
Yeah, the only reason we did it yesterday is I'm assuming y'all are taking notes. So as a workshop, I wanted y'all to be able to, you know, this is how we would normally do it. We might actually have a table. We'd have a, you know, a round table. I mean, I've actually venues become important for my community stuff, right? I've actually rented round tables and brought them to venues because the venues only had square tables. Right, because I think the round table, you know, the round table that fits 8 to 10 people is a key tool for my job anyway. Sometimes we do this, but we incorporate writing so much that we want, again, for the introverts or whatever, we want, you know, so we have worksheets, so then if we don't have tables, then I actually have like 70 clipboards, so sometimes we have clipboards. If we just can, you know, we can't get the round tables, we're just going to do circles of chairs. But yeah, I mean, being around the outside is certainly going to close off conversation a lot to it. That's why I did it this way, to kind of so you can actually see how it's going.
C100 have round tables. You don't have to bring it in.
Yeah.
Yeah, but you know, when someone
But then there's parking.
when someone doesn't talk, is it that they don't feel comfortable? You know, there's good reasons to not talk and there's bad reasons to not. You know, is it that they really want to talk but they don't? They never got a chance to jump in, right? You know, so at the end of it, they felt like, oh man, I never got to actually talk, right? So then certainly that the facilitator needed to make room for them, right? But sometimes, you know, some people just, I just want to listen, right? But sometimes that I don't want to listen is more of, I'm not an expert on this topic, so I don't want to talk. Well, everyone's an expert at some level at this topic, right? Right? So we don't want to, you know, so I think we're still trying to figure out the best way to do that in the sense of making room. And there's ways of calling on people without, you know, making them feel bad if they don't want to talk, right? It's like, you know, we have an interview. You want to jump in here? But make it really easy for them to say, I'm fine, right? And then you just kind of move on, right? But I would never want to put someone on the spot of saying, why haven't you talked? You know, I need you to talk now.
Well, I have been very lucky because the topic that we have chosen, those are really things that I feel very strong about, and I have done some research, and then it's really good for me, the topics.
So were you just doing an experiment to see if anyone would ask you to talk, or you were an introvert so you're waiting and didn't get a chance, or scared?
I think it was lazy.
Alright, so let's go ahead and take a break.
Just so you know, I think the food's supposed to be here at 11, like the next round of food. So we'll have like a buffet today, like lots of